Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
9 minutes before 8 is the time. Now, of course, we've talked a lot about some of the implications of COVID. One of them that might not immediately be relevant to you, but needs to be addressed, is what it's caused with our courts and the backlog there. Thousands of cases understandably piled up. So what can be done? Let's turn to Conservative MP, Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, who joins me now. Do we have an idea? Is there a number? Good morning to you, Mr. Raab. Is there a number of how many cases you might be talking about?
Well, there's a significant backlog. What I can tell you is that 95% of criminal cases actually go through the magistrates' courts, and the backlog's coming down there. But obviously the 5% most serious, complex, go through the Crown Court. That was massively disrupted because of the social distancing rule. You can imagine how that would apply to a 12-person jury. We've now stabilised the backlog. It's not increasing significantly, and we're now putting every effort we can into bringing it down. We opened a super court in Loughborough this week. We've got the Nightingale
What's a super court? Sorry to talk over you. What's a super court?
Not at all. So it can take multiple defendants, so let's say up to 10 or so, and that takes a big chunk of the work out of the other 2 or 3 courtrooms that would otherwise have to deal with it. And that means every year you can get 250 more cases through the system. It's only one element of it, but that's one thing. We've got 2 super courts now, one in Manchester, one in Loughborough. There's a whole range of Nightingale courts. We've lifted the limit on sitting days, and there's also the video technology that allows hearings to be done virtually, saving up court space and time. So we're absolutely bearing down on it because we know justice delayed is justice denied, and victims need to know that their cases will be heard properly and justice will be done.
Why don't we have a longer day for the courts? Typically, I understand, they sit at around 10 a.m. and they rise at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's like school day. Why don't they work a bit longer?
Well, you can look at that, but the problem is all the work and preparatory work that has to be done in and out of hearings to make sure that those hearings are as productive as possible. So we always look at all of those things and how you can make them more streamlined and efficient.
Well, I bet you'd love hours 10 till 4, wouldn't you? You work considerably harder. Why don't the courts?
Well, no, they work. I think, in fairness, the courts are working when they're not in the courtroom. The barristers and the solicitors are working.
No, but you need the jury there, obviously. So instead of sending the jury home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, let's let them know it's a full day shift. It's 10 till 6, and we'll rattle through more cases.
Yeah, but you've still got to make sure that the judges, the lawyers, are well prepared for those hearings. Otherwise, the jury won't get the quality of evidence that will allow them to make not just swift decisions, but the right decisions that call with principles of justice. But look, I'm looking at everything with the Lord Chief Justice, with the senior judiciary, how we speed things up and deliver swifter justice for the average citizen in this country, but I think particularly for victims who feel that they're in abeyance or caught up in that backlog.
If we move to other matters, you'll be anticipating this question, I imagine, Mr. Raab. Why can't the Prime Minister say sorry for attempting to effectively rewrite the rules last week of the standards in Commons?
Well, in fairness, the Cabinet Office Minister, Steve Barclay, yesterday, and I'm happy to say today, and all members of the government agree that it was a mistake to conflate 2 things. One is the individual case of Owen Paterson, and the other is the systemic process, if you like, the due process, the natural justice, the right of appeal for anyone accused with not adhering to the rules. So we've been clear that was a mistake. It's something I'm happy to say that we regret, I regret. But the reality is what we do need to find is a robust, sustainable system. And I think it is also right to look at the process of appeal, the due process, if you like, as anyone else listening to this show in any other walk of life would expect to have if a complaint is made about them. That's the way you make sure that the system is not just robust, but also sustainable. We need a cross-party approach to that. The Committee on Standards is looking at it. We hope to be able to work with other parties to make sure we've got a sustainable system.
How concerned are you that it would appear the Labour Party, albeit narrow, but have taken a poll lead for the first time in many, many months, possibly as a result of these allegations of sleaze, Deputy Prime Minister?
Look, the polls ebb and flow. What we're concentrated on is the business of government. The Prime Minister was up in the northeast at a hospital because we're still making sure we come through this pandemic. We're obviously we've had the spending review, making sure we've got the investment and the support for working people up and down this country. And we're hosting COP26. We're bringing the world together in Glasgow this week to make sure we can leave our planet a better place for our children. So I think that we're focused on the job, building this country back stronger and better, and bringing other countries together in the global challenges we face.
How appropriate is it that one of your colleagues managed to live in the Caribbean, work and do a job and vote remotely, making additional money to his salary? I speak, of course, of Geoffrey Cox, the former Attorney General. How appropriate is that?
Well, ultimately, there are clear rules on what needs to be declared. And in terms of accountability, it'll be up to voters to decide whether their MP representing them is got the right priorities. And that's the same for all of us.
Do you think there should be an end to these additional jobs, aside from, if you're a doctor or whatever it might be, these sort of paid advisors? Does that need to come to an end, Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, I think you just illustrated it in your question. Where would you draw the line? I think it is right, if you referred to the NHS, that Parliament has got the experience of people that are connected with and can still work, whether as a GP or a nurse, in the NHS. You could make that argument about other fields, teaching, business. I think the important thing, and the reason for that, Nick, is I think your viewers, listeners, and many people worry about people who have only got experience of politics. We need to make sure Parliament is exposed to the outside world. It informs and strengthens our debates, but you need strict rules around it, and that's the situation. I think there are strict rules about declarations and accountability for that.
Well, if there are strict rules, how can someone make all that money and be living 4,000 miles away from Westminster?
Well, you know about it precisely because of the transparency that's required. And ultimately, in terms of accountability, it's for the voters, the listeners watching your show, to hold all of us to account. That's the ultimate accountability we have in our democracy.
Your Deputy Prime Minister, are you worried about this, what appears to be tide of sleaze washing in?
Well, I think we're focused on the job at hand, but I always think it's important that we uphold the strongest standards of probity. I think when you're in jobs in public office, there's a higher standard. I've always accepted that personally myself, and I think it's important that we demonstrate that as well in our actions.
Are you in receipt of any paid consultancies?
No, it would be totally inappropriate, not least because I'm a minister.
But others have been.
Well, in fairness, if you're in government and you're a minister, you have a second job of sorts. I mean, again, are we suggesting that ministers shouldn't be derived from the pool of MPs? And that's why it's difficult to draw a hard line. But what we do have is clear rules on transparency, and ultimately voters will decide for their MP when they're working as a constituency MP and representing them, whether the individual in person, whoever that may be, has got the right priorities. I think that's right.
Lastly, can I take you back to a story of which you'll need no reminding, which was the attempt to take British citizens and others out of Afghanistan. And earlier this year, a new Afghan citizens resettlement scheme was launched with the aim to rehouse 5,000 vulnerable Afghans in the UK in year one and 20,000 in subsequent years. How many people have we got out?
Well, I don't know solely under the resettlement scheme, but as of the end of August, we'd secured the safe passage of 17,000.
That's indeed right. That was after the military operation. Subsequently, after that, how many have we helped out? Or have we just moved on?
No, we haven't moved on. Far from it. We've said that we will take up to 20,000 over years, 5,000 in year one. The Home Office, the Home Secretary, working very closely with the Ministry for Levelling Up and Communities, is looking about the integration package. Of course, safe passage out of Afghanistan for anyone that is fleeing persecution relies on an element of acquiescence or constructive engagement with the Taliban. This is one of the very earliest tests that the international community has set them.
Right.
But we have made sure that we can live up to our commitments.
OK, but I don't need to tell you, obviously, it's urgent to get these people out, not least because of the presence of the Taliban. So we've had September, we've had October, and we're getting through November. Can I put it to you that not one person has been brought back from Afghanistan?
Well, that's not true because...
so how many have?
So, as I said to you, we...
After never mind the military operation, I know that was tremendous work done by very brave men and women, and indeed civil servants on behalf of the government. I've got that, but once that operation came to an end, I don't think anybody's been brought out of Afghanistan, have they, Deputy Prime Minister?
No, that's not true, because both through third countries, but also via the directly out of Kabul with flights from Qatar Airways. There were flights that came out. I remember visiting the Pakistan-Afghan border, looking at the crossing.
Okay.
I can't give you a precise figure since I'm no longer Foreign Secretary, as Justice Secretary, but what I can tell you is actually the safe passage, the airlift, the evacuation, plus the other safe passage for Afghan workers and those that you mentioned, those under the resettlement scheme, that is probably the biggest evacuation in living memory. An incredible testament to not just the brilliant armed forces, but also the Foreign Office civil servants and the Home Office civil servants.
Lastly, Deputy Prime Minister, you're confident we'll hit that 5,000 target by the end of year one. I appreciate there's only about 2 months gone, so it'll be 10 months to get there. You're confident we'll hit that figure?
Well, of course, it depends on the Taliban living up to their assurances to allow safe passage out. It's one of the early tests. The international community will hold the Taliban to the undertakings that they've made.
I'm grateful for your time. Dominic Raab, thank you very much indeed. Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, appearing here on LBC when at 1 minute after 8, news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the Deputy Prime Minister